contrasts. We see contrasts all the time. There are contrasts in seasons and times. There's contrast between colors. For instance, in the tzitzit, the techalim, and the white that binds in unity the one set of strings added to the four corners. We want to follow the Mashiach, the one that was sent in truth and in spirit. Now, I jotted down a few notes on the first day of the week, and on Shabbat, I went and I was ready for my message for you to listen to, and I never opened my mouth. I listened. I listened to the messages that he has given through my voice. And I know the scriptures so very well, and he's giving me and many others such incredible understanding in these exciting times. Hine matov, umaramim, shevet akim gam yachad. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together. Now, I know that many of us know John 3:16, but his name was Yochanan, and he was the disciple beloved that laid his ear against the breast of the Messiah and listened to his heart beat. That heart was the incarnate Torah for that heart in YHWH, Messiah, Son Ben Yahweh. That Kodesh blood, that is what makes us clean and whole. And he said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. So, if we look at the book of Yochanan, and normally we start out in our Bibles, but I'm going to take the scriptures this time. And as we do, good spot, a few stickers, but not many. So, ouch, that was a sticker. Yochanan, chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, the Devorim. And the Word was with Elohim. And the Word was the Elohim. He was with him in the beginning, and through him all things were made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness didn't understand it. It didn't comprehend. So, we're going to look at contrasts. I'm going to pull out my heavy-duty books here, and we're going to look at some things that some are so obvious and some are hidden. And in the scripture it says it is the wonder and glory of a king to search wisdom from the scriptures. So, we pull out the scriptures and we start reading them. And as we do, start highlighting them. Highlight the words. And then go to your Strong's Concordance and find the Hebrew definitions and look at some of the contrasts of the Greek definitions that affect our fluffy mentalities today. And then we go to the Jeff Brenner's Complete Ancient Jewish Lexicon. It is the ancient Hebrew lexicon, and it is the Paleolithic Hebrew writings that were from the time of the grandson of Noah through to Hanukkah, and then through to Noah, and Noah through his sons, and through Shem all the way to Abraham, and Abraham, once it got in, and then they went into Egypt, the 12 tribes. I'm skipping a lot, I know, but that is the writing that was used, and the concrete definitions of the ancient Hebraic way of thought is so farly different than ours. We've lost something. Isaac Newton and Einstein stated the entropy laws. Everything goes from a state of order to disorder. You clean and straighten up your sock drawer, next week it'll be messy again. It's entropy. Everything goes from order to disorder. And I will bid this, that our English, and I understand it, and you understand it, and we can communicate, but it pales in comparison to the Paleolithic Hebrew. I don't understand it, but what I do understand is so fascinating and rich. So, we're going to look at some different topics that I've scribbled down here. And some are going to be obvious, but when we look at the Messiah coming and saying, I come in my Father's name, yet you don't receive me. But if another comes in his own name, him you'll receive. That means there is two, or a choice. If you look at the word Hasatan, who tempted Yeshua in the wilderness after 40 days, and he was hungry. And that hideous monster who we know as Hasatan, and I believe it is Azazel Zeus, Theos Deus, or any other name of any deity that is under him in the pantheon. And if you don't think that those beings still exist, they are eternal beings, and so are you. He has written in his word that he knows every one of us before we were born, conceived. He has purpose for us. That's from Jeremiah, middle. So, you have different things, and what we see and perceive is not always truth. It may have, as Colbert says, truthiness. A little bit of truth and a whole lot of exaggeration or embellishment. There's also the thing of something being original and true and a copycat or a plagiarism. You know that we've studied in our books that the word Hasatan, the adversary, the opponent of the Creator Yahweh, he's playing a game, and our lives are in the balance. And all of us around the world who have submitted to their belief in a deity that has changed his name. We don't even know who Zeus is, or the spherical Aten Ra of Egypt. Now, according to the commandments, I am not even to speak the names of any other mighty ones, and I do this knowingly committing that iniquity to tell you the truth. My life is in danger, as all of the prophets and the disciples and men of Yahweh were persecuted by the believers of the deity of this world. It's a masquerade. It's a counterfeit. Wake up, O my people, and come out of Babylon. I am exposing Babylon. And I know that there is a storm coming that is coming across the nations. And as in chapter 2 of Psalm, why do the nations rage? Read that and find out what it's talking about. We are in the time that YAHshua spoke about to his disciples in Matthew 24. Matityahu. He took Kepha and Yohanan, and he took them and he said, "Do not fall asleep," and he prayed. Read John 17 and what he spoke, and please read it out of the Scriptures or many other translations that have the transliterated Kodesh, holy name. This is important, folks. If you take an author and you take a story, his story, into a different language, and you change all of the names, and then you give that author a different name, a pseudonym, it's plagiarism. And I submit, as much as I love my Bible that I have studied for in years, diligent, and I recognized the Heavenly Father who sent his Son, who was the incarnate Torah. He didn't break a commandment. That means all 613 commandments he did perfectly, and no sin was found in him. Therefore, death had no hold. Oh, death, where is your sting? If there was no sin in him, the wages of sin is death. He laid down his life willingly for you and for me, and I rejoice and say hallelujah in front of the courthouse of Asotin County. So, as we wait for his imminent return, and we know in the book of Revelation it talks about a time, and I would say right now we are in a time, and all of those prophecies are happening. We are in the middle of Matthew 24. We are in the midst of the book of Revelation. What Daniel speaks about in chapter 9, we are there. Jeremiah, or Yirmiyahu was his name. He spoke about a time. And Malachi, and Haggai. My friends, I know that we watch the distractions from the illuminated ones, the Illuminati, Paramount, propaganda. It's to distract and misinform and keep you away from the name, Yahweh, the Creator, and his Son, YHWHY, YAHshua. Shua is salvation. This generation needs to know that. And those in the NWO do not want you to know the name, because they can keep you in bondage, as this book says, for interest and usury. It's the bankers, and if you look at the common denominators, they own all of the Bible companies and the printing presses down through since the time Gutenberg started printing. It's a control. You look at the time of Constantine and what happened in Rome and the setting up of the universal church. My friends, it's time to wake up and come out of Babylon. Let's look at some contrasts between death and life. And Those are the things that we need to comprehend when we're at the green pastures and the still waters. But what happens when the water gets rough? Noah had to deal with that. Are we ready? Ouch! So, the beavers have been in here. Okay. We don't want to sit on the Android devices. I don't care much for them, and you know, in the book of Revelation, where it says the 666, in the Hebrew that's the Bob, 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 and it says that we're to cause to have a mark, that all of the nations were deceived. This is a chip. It has a chip in it. Most everybody has one. The NWO has sponsored the technology, and maybe this isn't human technology, but borrowed from other races that ultimately are against us, and they are fighting against Yahweh, YHWH, and his Messiah when he comes. So, I can't see a darn thing without these dumb things. So, we're going to look at fact versus fiction. Freedom versus bondage. And salvation versus deception. YHWH versus Hasatan. What a Nabi, or a prophet, Prophet, versus a prophet, Profit, as in a margin, or mammon, money. What are the differences between righteous versus unrighteous? Because all those around me say, oh, we're saved by grace, lest any man shall boast. But if they know that verse, there is a name attached, and that name has been changed. And we defend it, because we like the thought of being saved by grace. And we can do whatever it is that we want. He'll save me. He didn't break any of them. And he said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. So, who is it that we pray to? In the name of Gimel, Dalet, GD, or JE, Zeus? If the name has been changed, the stipulation of forgiveness, of salvation, is null and void. That is what his blood was shed for. So, you have Yahweh's mitzvot, and you have 613 commandments, mitzvot, right rulings, and he says, obey them, and it will be well with you. Against his commandments, you have the laws of the world that judges and presidents swear on their Bibles, in God we trust. And then they enforce laws. Man-made laws, there's billions of them. And we can't keep them. But if you break them, you will have a fine. You will have a penalty. You will have incarceration. So we are not to break the man-made laws. What about Yahweh's? Most point to the Ten Commandments and say, oh yeah, they're good, or they are highly offended by them. But even on a statue of the Ten Commandments with the name YHWH removed and changed to the name of another, where the first commandment says, I am YHWH, have, this is my name forever. have no other deities. And then a few commandments, mitzvot later. Exodus chapter 6. You have, do not take the names of any other mighty ones. That's why I don't care for money much. Our money has the wrong name. And it is a copyrighted and patented, thou shalt not counterfeit, and they print it out of thin air, and when it is loaned and borrowed, money is created. And right now, our country has $23 trillion of debt. And listen to me, folks. The bankers and the nations are coming to foreclose on the property of USA. Our Constitution is no longer, it's been voided by subceding contracts of the UN and covenants between nations, and by the deity of the nation, in the name God and their little sheikhs. And what I know, quite honestly, gives me the shakes. So, the contrast of death versus life. Yahweh and the Messiah both said, choose life. He says that he who comes to the Messiah is free indeed. And those sins are cast away. The lady that was brought to him in the actual adultery act by the Pharisees, and they waited for the rabbi to pronounce judgment, and he said, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And the older men dropped their stones pretty immediately, but the younger boastful ones, it took them a while to see the judgment of the others in wisdom, because they could not refute the words of the Messiah. They tried to. But he said to her, where are your accusers? And she says, there are none. And he said, go and sin no more. It is in the name above all names, YAHshua, the Messiah, Mashiach ben David, ben Seth, ben Noah, ben Methuselah, ben Hanok, right back to Seth and through Noah. We have our words in our languages. We are listening and speaking English today, and that's for my benefit. I know my Hebrew quite well, but I have no one to converse. We'll wait for some of these for another time, but some of the things that I want you to look at is Matthityahu, the whole book, but particularly chapter 24. Everything else is the leading up to chapter 24, which I believe we're there. Why do they Shalom Aleichem, and thank you for joining us this fine Shabbat morning, and we are going to be looking at the book of Ibrahim, or Hebrews. And we're going to be doing a bit of multitasking, and I just welcome you to Shabbat.
By his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all, through whom also he made the ages, whom, being the brightness of the esteem and the exact representation of his substance, and sustaining all by the word of his power, having made a cleansing of our sins through himself, sat down at the right hand of the greatness on high, as is spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 110, verse 1. Having become so much better than the messenger, as he has inherited a more excellent name than them. For to which of my messengers did he ever say, "You are my son, today I have brought you forth," as is spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 2:7. And again, in Shemot, Exodus 7, verse 14, I shall become to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he said, let all the messengers of Elohim do reverence to him, as is spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 97, verse 7. And of the messengers, indeed he says, who is making his messenger spirit and his servants a flame of fire, as spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 104:4. But to the Son he says, your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever, le'olam va'ed. A scepter of straightness is the scepter of your reign. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Because of this, Elohim, your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions, as it is spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 45, verse 6 and 7. And you, Master, did found the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They shall perish, but you remain, and they shall all grow old like garments. And like the mantle you shall fold them up, and they shall be changed. You are the same, and your years shall not fail, as it is spoken of in Tehillim, Psalm 102, verse 25 through 27. And to which of the messengers did he ever say, sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet, as spoken of in Psalm Tehillim 110. Are they not all serving spirits sent out to attend those who are about to inherit deliverance? YHWH. Hebrews chapter 2.
I apologize for stepping away. I had the most interesting conversation. Now, just a second ago, we had such a very interesting vehicle pull-up that was very official. And as it turned out, for the Army Corps of Engineers, he was a state game warden, and we had a discussion about, of course, the book of Hebrews. Now, my conversations normally end up quite interesting. But first we need to look at who the author was. Now, most that have gone to the seminaries for the theological degrees, they don't know some basics. If they read all the way through the book of Hebrews, at the chapter 13, he gives some addresses, the author of his book, and he names some names, and you can tell it is Shaul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus, who was a student of the school of Gamaliel. There were two different rabbinical thoughts. There was the Shema and the other side, which at the time was Gamaliel. They were the master of masters within the rabbinical, but were they of the line of Kohanim or the Levites? Or did they receive their priesthood from another authority? Now, maybe on the road to Damascus, when Shaul of Tarsus was going there with orders from the Sanhedrin to do business on the believers in the Messiah. How dare them? And he went to persecute them. And on the road, he on his horse, and a light, and he apparently was not on his horse for long, and he looks up at a light, and he would have said, "Adonai, is that you?" And the voice says, "No, it is YAHshua, whom you persecute." You must read the book of Acts from start to finish, and you need to understand it in a context that those individuals knew the Torah. They studied their parashahs. They studied their Torahs. They lived in the scrolls. And on Shabbat, they met at the synagogue. And the synagogues were controlled by the Mystery Babylon at the point when the Messiah came, in about the 4,000th year from light. Right now, we are towards the end of the 6,000th year. So, from the time of Adam through to Noah, and then from Noah through Shem and his line through to Abraham. And from Abraham, the sons, Yitzhak and Yaakov, and the blessed sons of Yaakov, who were the 12 tribes. And then when they left the land of Ur, I'm skipping some things, but they went into the land of Egypt because of a drought. And the 11 sons, through their brother, who was Jehoshaphat, down a pit or a fall, it's pit, the Pei, and the Lamed. It's to pour out. we'll get to that Paleolithic study another time. So, you have about 1,000 or so years from the time of creation in Bereshit to the flood. That was the time of Hanuk. And Hanuk ruled and was a great-great-grandfather to a mighty nation that walked righteously, while the Canaanites ruled the world in debauchery and wickedness and violence. And the flood came as promised, as a judgment to carry away the uncleanness of what was going on that Yahweh said not to do. From the creation, Adam and Hava, they lived in the garden, and it's Adon, it's a court or a place of grass and of trees. It's a courtyard. But there's also the courtyard of judgment. That's Edom. It was made perfect that Adam and Eve had everything. Adam, had the authority because he was created in the image of Yahweh. And Hasatan, Azazel, Sevirikoatan Ra, Thor, Adonis, Zeus, God, has been the deity of the nations, the Gentiles, and controlled with an iron fist a new world order. And if you look back into ancient times, that new world order and their practices and their obelisks and their sacrifices and their atonements are counterfeits. Now, Sheol of Tarsus, who was on the road to Damascus, and he met the Mashiach. The Mashiach found him and blinded his eyes, because Paul at that time was blind. He could see with his eyeballs. He knew Torah. He had been taught by the finest school or order of Judaism. He was of the tribe of Benjamin. He was an Israelite. He was not of the tribe of Judah. There's so much history that I would love to cover with people, but time is of an essence. That is why it's so important. For instance, we may skim over and maybe just hit highlights from the book of Hebrews. And if you take that one scripture and take it out of context, and then you change the names that give that scripture authority, you cannot change the author's name, the authority of the book. His name is YHWHY. Where is the congregation of YHWHY in my community or your community? If we have freedom of religion, my friends, why is he, the Creator, conspicuously missing? It is because the deity of the nations has persecuted the name Yahweh and his Messiah YAHshua, and those that commit themselves to righteousness, trying to live what this word says, his commandments, his mitzvot, his right rulings. And the enemy, the adversary, Satan, does not want you to keep those commandments. And when you break those commandments, the deity of the nation then has authority to punish. My friends, at the great white throne that is still in the future, Baruch Hashem, the Messiah comes. But the great white throne is a one-answer judgment. They will say, "Oh, Lord, did we not pray and prophesy in your name?" The answer is no, they didn't. They prayed in the name of another, Zeus. And Yahweh, the Father of the Messiah, YAHshua, has absolutely no affiliation other than creating the damn being. They are fallen. They are the Nephilim. And Saul of Tarsus is pointing out in the book of Hebrews, the Messiah had to come and fulfill the Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Shema and Bereshit. It is all foundational for the rest of the scriptures. And if you change the name, the covenants, do they become null and void? Is ignorance bliss? Ignorance of the law, if you're speeding and you didn't know that you're speeding, you will still get a ticket and probably pay a fine. That's why, as a believer, a humble person, and nothing of guilt, I have a official from the State Department, and he's checking, and I visited with him, and I shared the good news of the name. And I asked him if he knew Miss Jade Helm, and he had no idea. And I introduced him a bit what is going on, and then directed him back to the name. Because as we've studied just this week, Matthew 24, and the things that the Messiah spoke to his disciples that shall come to pass, those are happening as you hear the waves come in and go out. We're in the time that men's hearts shall faint because of fear of the waves. Nation shall rise against nation. He talks about wars and rumors of wars. There is information and there is misinformation, and all of it has very little truth. You cannot change the proper nouns. Sheol of Tarsus, who wrote the majority of the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, the covenant. It is a renewed covenant and is based on the commandments. The Messiah said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." And when we don't, we have a name that we are to confess. Restore his name, YAHshua, who came in his Father's name, Yahweh. He spoke this to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin. And he said, if another comes in his own name, him you will receive. In fact, they print that other mighty one's name right on the green monetary system that has been the standard for the last 60, 70, 80 years. No, the wealth goes way back. It is very occult. And the one, as we know, is Satan. He is an eternal being. And he was cast as a punishment into the midst of the earth. We live in the time of revelation, and those beings have been released. YouTube videos on UFOs and unidentified flying objects is at an absolute all-time high. The last week, thousands of sightings. Now, I believe those beings that we see here on Earth are terrestrial, and they are from within the Earth. They are demonic beings. And then there are the extraterrestrials, that perhaps they are the Kodesh Melachim, the Watchers, that Hanukkah spoke about, and Jude spoke about, and many times, like the announcement of the Messiah, where Gabriel came and visited Miriam and Joseph and announced the good news of the Messiah. My friends, we need to repent, and we need to turn back to this word. The book of Hebrews is so very specific because Paul knows, Saul of Tarsus knows the Torah and the prophets so well. In the first chapter, there are 7 times that the Psalms are spoken verbatim. And then you have from Exodus that says Yahweh shall have a son in his image. And that is what the whole book of Hebrews is based on. And Shaul of Tarsus, he was a lawyer, a lawman for the law. The law is Torah. We live in a time where there is no Torah. The churches have thrown it out, saying that they have been fulfilled, nailed to the cross, and therefore they don't need to turn back there. And they say they're saved by grace, lest any man shall boast in a name that starts with J that was not his name. People, wake up. Pray to Yahweh and his son, the Messiah, YAHshua, because all of the promises that he made in all of the Bibles, translated, it's true. It is a true story. But if you translate the meanings and then you change the proper nouns, it's a perversion. If in this book it has the Kodesh name, which meaning a Bible, if you look up the word Lord, L-O-R-D, there are over 2,880 some odd uses of the word L-O-R-D. That means, with the restored names, the scriptures, just with that one word L-O-R-D, has 2,880 some odd truths. You can't change the name, and that is what Paul, he had not even conceived that could be a problem. Hasatan has manipulated our languages from the time of Babylon. And he has his orders of the temple builders, and they do what he says. They are very Luciferian. They are in the shadows. They meet behind closed doors. And they manipulate industries and people and country against country. Paul, Shaul of Tarsus, is speaking about the Messiah, and it must be understood who he was, the suffering servant that came, as all of the prophets foretold. They also foretell of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It's Yehuda, Yahweh, and that army. He has a remnant in the midst of wickedness. Turn to Yahweh. Turn back to the Messiah. Turn back to the Scriptures. We don't have much time. The jadish color helm axes are about to come down on us. The sword is coming up from the earth and the arrows are pointing down. It is a upside down pentagram. It is that rider on the white horse that carries a bow, that is a counterfeit. The real Messiah, who shall come, who comes on a white horse from the heavenlies with an army of his sanctified Kodesh, set apart ones. How do you become one of those ones? You study and you guard and you honor what he has asked us in the commandments, all 613 commandments. Not all of those apply. For instance, some apply to only men and some only to women. So the ones that apply. And the second commandment in the Torah, the first one is be fruitful and multiply. That hasn't passed away. That hasn't been fulfilled. The second one, the second commandment in Genesis or Bereshit is, I am Yahweh. I have created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Sanctified it and set it apart as Kadosh for you and for all generations to come. This is an everlasting covenant. And the Gentile churches worship on the first day of the week, and they scoff at those who try to keep the Torah or Shabbat, and they do not understand it, and they say we're saved by grace. I submit that they, in their worship to God, are serving the one that Moshe and all of the prophets and the Messiah and his disciples said, do not follow after. Be separate, kadosh, a peculiar people, by keeping the commands, the mitzvot, and walking with seat. And when people ask us, we have his light that will shine truth and love of the Messiah, YAHshua, the resurrected one who lives within us. And greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. Baruch Hashem.
Shema YISRAEL YAHWH Eloheinu YAHWH ECHAD Baruch Shem Kevod U'Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. You are worthy, Hashem YAHshua, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. alone. Hear, Shema YISRAEL, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh Echad. He is the Echad, the one. And what is that? He is the Kodesh Echad of Yisrael. YAHshua is your name. And there is no other name to get to the Father but through the Son. The Son is the door. You cannot change the door. You cannot change His name. If you change His name, you try to climb onto the path from some other way. And you can think you're one of His sheep, but you do not know. We do not know in this generation the Master's voice. The Master, who is that? That is YAHshua ben David Rapha. He is the keeper of the sheep. And in Yochanan chapter 17, as we spoke just a few days ago, what that prayer was to His Father in heaven, that as He and the Father were echad, one, that we, the believers that have been entrusted to Him and to keep His commandments and join with Him on the Sabbath day and to keep His Kodesh name, Hashem, in high esteem, and to speak it, Yahweh, YAHshua. Yahweh is salvation, is the translation of the meaning of the one and only Son, Yahweh, son of Miriam, born in a Sukkot. He was circumcised on the 8th great day of Shema YAHshraEL of Sukkot. My friends, He's returning. He has promised that He will return, but He and all of His disciples and all of the prophets also gave warnings that we must heed. But you cannot get those warnings if you don't turn back to the Torah, if you don't read the complete work of Daniel or Yeshayahu or Yirmiyahu. And we cannot change all of the proper nouns into our fluffy English, because that is what the enemy, Hasatan, the adversary, that's what it means as adversary in our translation. He is the opponent of Yahweh. And in the book of Revelation it says that entity deceives all of the nations. That's why the Messiah says, come out of her, come out of Babylon. He who has ears, let him hear the word of YHWH, Yahweh's salvation. The calling of the shofar. It is all about the time that we're in now, which is Shavuot, which is 50 days from the time of Pasach or Passover. My friends, we're in some exciting times, and keep your ears out for His truth, His name, His mitzvot and right rulings, and His Shabbat. If you want to find Abba, the Father, Abba is in the midst of the shit. Shh. Abba, Shabbat. Abba's in the midst of Shabbat. Have fellowship with Him through the name of His one and only Son, YAHshua of Nazareth, born in the city of bread, Bethlehem, house of bread. My friends, He's the one returning. But there is another that rules this world. He is the king of this world, the deity of this world. His DBA is in God we trust. You know that's His name because it's printed on the money system. What if that money system just happened to collapse? That people that all of a sudden realize that there is no trust in God and the monetary system, and we have to trust on Yahweh and His path of righteousness. What is the path of righteousness? It is straight and narrow, and that is YAHshua, and in no other name. He is the resurrected one who is returning, and He ultimately, and His Tezavot, His host, are coming to judge and destroy sin. He cannot be apart. He must come, and if He has a remnant of people that love Him and keep His commandments and love His Shabbat and know His name and rejoice and get persecuted by those in the world. So, there it is. Messiah is coming back. And in 2 Thessalonians, which we've done the complete book this week, the shofar, the sounding of the shofar of heaven, Shema Yahweh Tezavot, and His Messiah, YAHshua, His salvation. Repent and turn back to